Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a video looking at the fallout to what Times Radio here, or one of their guests called a massively incompetent, the massively incompetent breach of security, whereby all of the top brass of the American administration, particularly in terms of national security, were potentially breaking the Espionage Act. You know all the details already, sharing stuff on Signal that really shouldn't have been shared on Signal. You should have these SCIFs, these secure environments in which you do your communications. You don't do it on a phone. And I walked you through this last night in the breaking news update. You haven't seen that, go and check that out, where I talk more about the details of what actually happened. I'm not going to talk about what happened. I'm going to talk about what the reaction has been to this in the media from different people, and also talk a lot about the huge hypocrisy involved. I'm just going to let the people from this Times Radio interview just give a brief, though.
There was a run-up of several days in which it included,
which I think is fairly useful to get our heads around it.
It's just, I mean, one kind of runs out of superlatives really here. This is an extraordinary security breach. I mean, the fact, I mean, you laid it out there very well, Kate, and also what we hear from the article now written by the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, who's written this account of what happened, was not only did it include details of the war planning, the targets being used, the U.S. assets being used. This was, hours before the strike on the Houthis last week, but it went on for longer than this. There was a run-up of several days in which it included quite a lively discussion about the merits and the actual whether or not it was a good idea to hit the Houthis, which also included the remarkable intervention of J.D. Vance, the vice president, saying he wasn't in favor of it because it would be good for the Europeans, because it was the Europeans who mostly benefited from the trade going through the going through the Red Sea. Look, this.
I'm going to be looking at that claim later on in the video.
This is, I mean, this on so many levels, Kate. This is just such an astonishing screw up. I mean, firstly, what on earth were they doing conducting these extremely confidential, top secret conversations on an app? On their phones, presumably. Signal is an app now. It's a secure app, but it's not as secure as the usual communication systems the senior U.S. government officials use. Usually, these conversations are not supposed to happen outside what are called SCIFs, which are secure, comparted information facilities, where if you're a senior official, national security official, you have to be inside a building. They often have them built inside their homes to protect against the risk of hacking and all of this kind of stuff. So they were conducting this conversation, this like a bunch of sort of schoolgirls talking about, or schoolboys for that matter, talking about what they were getting up to.
You can use girls if you want. Perhaps that's more appropriate.
I don't want to accuse of being sexist. Schoolboys can be much worse than girls on this, as we know. And they're this unbelievably loose conversation. And by the way, this from a bunch of people who were incredibly critical of the security arrangements that the Democrats had, whether it was Hillary Clinton and her famous, emails being sent from a private email server and all this kind of stuff. It is just an astonishing level of incompetence, recklessness, lack of concern, lack of security, lack of interest in the security of, this could have put. I mean, as I say, as it happened to this editor, Jeffrey Goldberg, had this information a couple of hours before. Unfortunately, I mean, he was a responsible journalist. He obviously didn't publish it, and he hasn't published still, even after the event, details, any of the really, really sensitive details about weapons and targets and all that kind of stuff. But he had that information hours before this attack took place. Imagine, who else could have been included in that, or if he had accidentally leaked it to somebody else. I mean, it could have, it could put American lives at risk. It could put Allied lives at risk. I mean, this will just, this will alarm allies. It will alarm anybody who's interested in this. And I think, and I hope, there has to be a major revision going on here with some heads rolling and everything else, because it is a security breach.
Yeah, it's really.
So an astonishing security breach, staggering incompetence. etc., etc. Will there be any ramifications? And that's really what we're going to look at. We're going to look at the reactions to this. I mean, this is what it says about unclassified and CUI information. Quote, the misuse and mismanagement of mobile apps poses a cybersecurity and operations security risk. It's coming from the Department of Defense. And of course, these guys have been involved fully in that and have arguably fallen foul of the Espionage Act. Michael Cohen says, pretty insane that Mike Walls put 18 national security officials in a group chat to discuss war plans, and none of them said, should we be doing this on Signal? 18 of them. I mean, this went right to the top. Now, Jeffrey Goldberg himself has stuff to say on the matter, speaking here with Jens Psaki.
The Houthis are not going to know about this for another couple of hours.
And you know about it.
Well, and I know about it, and I'm thinking to myself, I mean, honestly, I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm glad that Mike Waltz didn't invite a Houthi into the group or a Russian spy or an adversary of the United States. But put that aside. I'm reading this and I'm wondering, not only why am I reading this, but why would the Secretary of the Treasury need to know the precise attack sequence of this upcoming operation? Again, I don't want to talk about...
And this is a really good point. Like, what's Scott Bessent doing? Like, Secretary of the Treasury? Like, what the hell does he need to know about the sequencing of attacks and what's being targeted and this and that?
Weapons systems, packages, targets in any specificity, because, you know, I'm trying to be... I want to be a responsible person, and I'm more interested in the decision-making anyway than I am in the actual technical details of it.
Absolutely. Also says this.
Responsible here and not disclose the things that I read and saw. I will describe them to you. The specific time of a future attack, specific targets, including human targets, meant to be killed in that attack, weapon systems, even weather reports, or, you know, that the government is I don't know why Hegseth was sharing it with everybody. I mean, the precise detail, and then a long section on sequencing. This is going to happen, then that is going to happen. After that happens, this happens, then that happens, and then we go and find out if it worked. I mean, you know, he can say that it wasn't a war plan, but it was a minute-by-minute accounting of what was about to happen.
It was a war plan. So Pete Hegseth has come out and said, I did not share war plans on there. And Jeff Goldberg is saying, look, I can't show you this stuff because of operational security and I'm responsible. But it was a war plan. Like, and also, most of the people on that did not need to know about any of this stuff, like, let alone me. It is staggering. Now, there are some interesting details about some of the people who were in this group. So Goldberg says that the Signal group chat started on March the 13th. Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, appeared to write in that chat minutes later. So she wrote as soon as it was kind of created, and then Gabbard sent this tweet the very next day. So she's already in this group. She's in the Signal group that she should know is a breach of security protocol. And then the Houthi strikes happened 2 days later. But she said this on the day after she was put in that group and had commented in that group. Any unauthorized release of classified information is a violation of the law and will be treated as such. She has basically indicted herself there. You could argue. I mean, the question is, what's going to happen about all of this? Again, we'll get to that. Then we have, so it's set up at 4:28 in the afternoon on March the 13th. Steve Witkoff, the envoy to Russia, the Middle East, so I presume in his position of envoy to the Middle East, was involved in this. Witkoff was wrapping up his Moscow visit then, and his plane departed a few hours later. Of course, we don't know what other USG Signal and WhatsApp groups are running in parallel, and that's what I talked about last night. This is the tip of the iceberg. You can bet there are dozens, probably, of other groups on different platforms with different personnel. So Steve Witkoff was participating in a Signal group discussing war plans against Houthis while being physically in Moscow, perhaps even in the Kremlin. he met Putin late on March the 13th. Now, if you met him late on March the 13th and he was kept waiting for 8 hours, you know, there's some argument, or the investigation needs to take place exactly where he was when he was put on this group. As Deborah Haynes says, wait, what? Steve Witkoff, Trump's special envoy, was physically in Moscow when Mike Walls, Trump's national security advisor, set up his Signal chat to discuss war plans in Yemen. Okay, so, well, what's this? Well, that particular Signal chat, yeah, so he was, yes. So I was just going to, that's what I've already read. Perhaps even in the Kremlin, yes, so we have this situation whereby he might have been, I'm sure it gets discussed somewhere. Yeah, here we are. It's Colby Badwar, sorry, getting myself confused. What are the chances that Witkoff connected his phone to the Kremlin's guest Wi-Fi network while Putin had him waiting around for hours? Probably pretty high. So the Russians have been reading that group chat and God knows what else. Olga Lautman, so I put in a quick timeline on the insane Signal classified chat, and sure enough, it looks like Kremlin asset Witkoff was in Moscow when he was added to the Houthi chat. I checked Russian media, and he left on Friday morning Moscow time. Meanwhile, the chat was set up Thursday, so actually, you know, he was well there. So Colby Badwar then says Signal is encrypted, but it's well established that Witkoff is an idiot. So all the Russians would have to do is tell him to scan his QR code to connect. You know, there is every chance that they could have had access to that. Especially, you know, you could even argue waiting 8 hours is a way of being able to scour his phone as he's on Wi-Fi. You know, famously. Yeah, I've been at training sessions on public Wi-Fi or guest Wi-Fi's being insecure, and you're open to all sorts of issues. Well, if anyone can do that, it's the freaking Kremlin. And this guy's using Signal, just been added onto a chat, and here he is speaking to the top brass of the entirety, almost apart from Trump, of the American administration. Now, if Russia has access to that, that is freaking terrible. It's on Signal. There are chances they are able to read that and any other group that he happens to be on. And then that 8 hours is a very useful time to have him sitting in a room while they're scouring his phone. Heads have to roll for this, but will they? Now we get on to the whole hypocrisy bit.
In part because of criticism around her handling of classified information. How do you expect Republicans to respond to what we've learned about how it was being handled by the current Secretary of Defense and others?
Well, it'll be child's play to go back and find all of the Republicans who were demanding congressional investigations and that Hillary Clinton apologize and leave the campaign and so on, based over her handling of the information, most of which was not classified, I think. This was clearly classified and of an extremely sensitive and significant nature. So I would hope that they would at least acknowledge the emergency that is represented by virtue of these kinds of practices. And
are they going to even acknowledge it? Well, we'll come on to that in a second. Now let's look at what some of these people said about Hillary Clinton's emails. Let's go through some of these, shall we? This just aired on CNN last night.
If there was anyone other than Hillary Clinton, they would be in jail right now.
Nobody is above the law, not even Hillary Clinton, even though she thinks she is. Mishandling classified information is still a violation of the Espionage Act.
When you have the Clinton emails, on top of the fact that the sitting president of the United States admitted he had documents in his garage, they didn't prosecute, they didn't go after these folks.
Hillary Clinton responded tonight with this: "You have got to be kidding me."
We'll come on to that soon. So that was CNN just putting a few of them together. Sarah Longwell has a thread where she has looked at all of these people saying what we knew they said, but in a very explicit manner.
When I'm president of the United States, neither she nor any of these other people are going to be above the law, whether it's her or Eric Holder for what he did on Fast and Furious or any of these other folks. People are going to be held accountable if they broke the laws of this country. This president obviously is willing to protect his political cronies, but we're going to hold people accountable. Nobody is above the law, not even Hillary Clinton, even though she thinks she is.
And every single one of these videos needs to be played back to them while they are being interviewed. Stephen Miller here, who was on the chat, one point says Stephen Miller, that doesn't get enough, made enough about Hillary's unsecured server illegally used to conduct state business, obviously created to hide the Clintons' corrupt pay for play. Foreign adversaries could easily hack classified ops and intel in real time from other side of the globe. Oh yeah? Oh yeah, Stephen Miller? Do you want to say that today? How about Pete Hegseth?
Pete Hegseth, what do you think?
Well, she's got two problems here. Two words, top secret.
Right. Yeah.
Before it was servers, it was classified. It was sort of this amorphous idea that maybe it was wrong. Everyone knows what top secret means. I've had a top secret clearance. It's big red flashing letters, top secret. You know when you're looking at something that's top secret or dealing with it. In this case, the public will resonate with that. Hey, if you're hiding that on a private server, that's a very real problem.
Well, and the other
likely criminal charges to follow if they're being fair about it.
I mean, could there be Pete Hegseth?
Likely criminal charges to follow if they're being fair about it. So if the US government are being fair about it now, there will be criminal charges to follow with Pete Hegseth. Just clearing that up because that's Pete Hegseth's own voice there. And then yet again, we can hear him.
At the very highest level, that person would be in prison. There would be outrage across the board. But here, it's covered up. It's incredible.
No, the double standard is incredible. Imagine if it was, I don't know, Donald Trump, what the media would be doing to him right now, eviscerating him. Or imagine if it was a member of the military, which we've seen from General Cartwright and General Petraeus. They still go after these guys for a tiny fraction of what she willfully did and betrayed her country in doing so, supposedly for convenience, but actually so she could have a different set of standards and hide her conduct and the conduct of the Clinton Foundation, Benghazi, everything else, so she could stay away from and above the law. And it turns out foreign services want to know what our Secretary of State thinks. And in this instance, they did whatever they could to break an unsecure server in her basement. It tells you everything you need to know.
Wait a second.
And so he goes on for another minute, but absolutely worth listening to. And we've heard from Tulsi Gabbard, any unauthorized release of classified information is a violation of the law and will be treated as such. Will it, though? Will it? You've literally just said that after you joined that group. And Pete Hegseth again.
Apparently, the standard operating procedure inside the Clinton Secretary of State office was to send emails that couldn't otherwise be printed to the maid to print them out of a secure area or from a secure area and then hand them off. Any security professional, military, government, or otherwise, would be fired on the spot for this type of conduct and criminally prosecuted for being so reckless with this kind of information. The fact that she wouldn't be held accountable for this, I think, blows the mind of anyone who's held our nation's secrets dear, who's had a top secret clearance like I have and others, who know that even one hiccup causes a problem, let alone a standard procedure like this. Apparently, the standard...
And there you go. And then we have John Ratcliffe.
Classified information is still a violation of the Espionage Act. It started with Hillary Clinton. It has continued without accountability. Right. People haven't paid a price for that, and that's one of the reasons Bill Barr and John Durham and folks need to really focus on that, because there does need to be accountability there.
There you go. So on and so forth. Absolutely incredible. Now, Mike Walls, this tweet from 2023, he's the National Security Advisor. Biden's sitting National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan sent top secret messages to Hillary Clinton's private accounts. And what did the DOJ do about it? Not a damn thing, said Mike Walls. Okay. Well, are you going to be complaining quite so vociferously now, my friend? Just interested in what your position is right now on that, like right now. Donald Trump, let's hear Trump.
On political corruption, we are going to restore honor to our government.
2016.
In my administration, I'm going to enforce all laws concerning the protection of classified information. No one will be above the law. On political...
No one will be above the law, he says, then breaks the law and keeps classified information in his bathroom. Yeah, well done. But also hypocrite. And Jessica Tarlov, the only liberal on the 5 on Fox, is absolutely right. I don't want to ever hear but her emails again.
Donald Trump's ratings on handling the economy, inflation, cost of living are all tanking. And we're seeing this administration's incompetence and recklessness on a scale unimaginable. I'm sure you guys saw this incredible Jeffrey Goldberg piece from right before we got on air a couple years ago about Goldberg, who is a journalist at The Atlantic, being invited into a private Signal chat with all of our national security heads. So Rubio, Hegseth, Waltz, Tulsi Gabbard, Scott Besson's in there, et cetera. And they are planning on just Signal to drop bombs in Yemen. So they're not doing this in a SCIF. They're doing it on an app that you and I, we all have on our phones. And it's obviously incredibly reckless, national security risks. I don't want to ever hear but her emails again. I don't know what's going to happen to anyone who's involved in something like this. But on top of it, you have the vice president. He's in there as well, contradicting Donald Trump on his policy on Europe. So all of this is going on. We're only a couple months into this administration. And when Carville says, let's see what they do, you get stuff like this.
Yeah. Beth Rigby, who is a very well-respected political journalist in the UK, the Atlantic security breach revelation, genuinely one of the most extraordinary stories I've ever read. It's simply astounding. It's also a devastating breach of national security. Surely huge fallout now in the US also raises concerns for allies like the UK. The question is, will there be huge fallout? So Hillary Clinton here, her reaction, as we heard, you have to be kidding me. Which I think is delightfully pithy and on point there. You've got to be kidding me. Really? This has happened and I was given that much hassle. Wow. But will anything happen about it? Well, this is the National Security Council statement. At this time, the message thread that was reported appears to be authentic. So this is confirming it happened, right? And we are reviewing how an inadvertent number was added to the chain. Inadvertent number. Okay. The thread is a demonstration of the deep and thoughtful policy coordination between senior officials. The ongoing success of our Houthi operation demonstrates that there were no threats to our service members or our national security. No, because Goldberg didn't leak it. Because Goldberg, luckily, was a responsible journalist. You don't know whether the Russians got hold of it. Whether they did anything or didn't do anything on purpose. You don't know. You can't be sure. But it's this. The thread is a demonstration of the deep and thoughtful policy coordination between senior officials. So instead of saying, oh, this is awful, we are going to look into it. This is a bad security breach and we do apologise, but we're putting an investigation in place. It's like, this shows how awesome we are. We're so cool. Like that we're talking on Signal about these really deep, national security matters. Isn't it nice how we're all having a chat? And I'll tell you what I really liked about it. It was just the emojis that were flying around all over the shop. Everyone loves a prayer hands emojis. Yeah, because, So then we get a sense of, or do we actually, how genuine was this reaction? So this is Trump's reaction to the leak when he was first asked about it at a White House presser.
Your reaction to the story in The Atlantic that said that some of your top cabinet officials and aides had been discussing very sensitive material through Signal and included an Atlantic reporter for that. What is your response to that?
I don't know anything about it. I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic. To me, it's a magazine that's going out of business. I think it's not much of a magazine, but I know nothing about it. You're saying that they had what?
If you believe this, some people, I've been watching that Times radio interview. The host on there was saying, he seemed really not to know about it. No, this is bad acting. I'm sorry. If he's a president and doesn't already know when the article's already been out and the reporter's reporting on that article, if he doesn't know about that leak already, you are stupid. He knows about that. He would have known about that when the Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, let those people know when he was questioning whether it was authentic. They would have known then that there would be an article coming out about this. He 100% knows about this. This is all performative. And he's not answering the question. He's slagging off the Atlantic.
We're using Signal to coordinate on sensitive materials and
having to do with what? Having to do with what? What were they talking about?
With the Houthis.
The Houthis? You mean the attack on the Houthis? Right. Well, it couldn't have been very effective because the attack was very effective. I can tell you that. I don't know anything about it. You're telling me about it for the first time.
And then he moves on. Like, if I just heard about that, I'd be like, whoa, that's nuts. Okay. But he's like, no, I heard about it the first time. It was a great attack. Anyway, someone else. No. But actually, that's been one of the lines, is that, well, it wasn't a problem because the attack was so successful. If the president's telling the truth and no one's briefed him about this yet, that's another story in itself, says Tom Nichols. Absolutely. If he literally didn't know anything, that's freaking terrible. You have to assume he knew something. In any other administration, COS would have, Chief of Staff would have been in the Oval within nanoseconds of learning about something like this. Absolutely correct. Trump's response was not genuine. Not genuine. Now, what about Pete Hegseth's own response?
Looking forward to it. One question.
Can you share how your information about war plans against the Houthis in Yemen was shared with a journalist in The Atlantic? And were those details classified?
He's just going to laugh it off.
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again, to include...
This is called poisoning the well, or ad hominem attacks, poisoning the well. So you're discrediting the source, shooting the messenger effectively. This is informally fallacious and doesn't stand up. No, what about do you deny he was on that? Because at the moment, the National Security Council are saying that those messages appear genuine. So you can slag him off for whatever, but he's put screen grabs of those messages and they appear to be genuine according to your own National Security Council. So all of your claims about him peddling lies, blah, 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 is irrelevant. You need to answer for what's just happened.
Include the hoaxes of Russia, or the fine people on both sides hoax, or suckers and losers.
What do you mean fine people on both sides hoax? He literally said that.
Losers hoax. So this is the guy that peddles in garbage. This is what he does. I would love to comment on the Houthi campaign because of the skill and courage of our troops. I've monitored it very closely from the beginning. And you see,
we know because you put it on Signal.
4 years of deferred maintenance under the Trump administration. Our troops, our sailors were getting shot at as targets. Our ships couldn't sail through. And when they did shoot back, it was purely defensively or at shacks in Yemen. President Trump said, no more. We will reestablish deterrence. We will open freedom of navigation, and we will ultimately decimate the Houthis, which is exactly what we're doing as we speak from the beginning, overwhelmingly.
Why were those details
why were those details shared? It doesn't answer the question. In fact, the community notes on this is one of them, but there's a massive community notes that you see on that Hegseth video where people have been like, no. It's supposed to have some for national security, confirm the authenticity that Goldberg was inadvertently added, etc., etc., etc. So, that is an absolutely unacceptable response, in my opinion, from Pete Hegseth himself. Here we have, and just the response that nobody was texting war plans, which is what we heard from him.
Nobody was texting war plans. Given you were privy to this group chat, is that how you saw it?
No, that's a lie. He was texting war plans. He was texting attack plans. When targets were going to be targeted, how they were going to be targeted, who was at the targets, when the next sequence of attacks were happening. I didn't publish this, and I continue not to publish it because it felt like it was too confidential, too technical, and I worry, honestly, that sharing that kind of information in public could endanger American military personnel. But no, they were plans for the attack.
And that goes on for 5 minutes, that interview. But, you know, the point is, no, Pete Hegseth is lying. He did text war plans, literally texted the plans of what they were going to do. Now, my question in the breaking news update that I did on this last night was, how would Fox News react to this? And here is the first reaction that I saw.
All right, on to another big story today out of The Atlantic, where their editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, has reported that he was accidentally sent sensitive information about military strikes in Yemen. The messages come from 18 national security officials. They were sent through the encryption app Signal, and there are indications that they appear to be authentic. I think there are...
He doesn't call it a messaging app. He calls it an encryption app. No one says that's an encryption. What's Signal? It's an encryption app. What's WhatsApp? It's an encryption app. No, it's not. It's a messaging app. But he doesn't... words are really important. You see how these people are reporting it.
Two takeaways from this story as of what we know today. One, it is incredibly concerning that sensitive information would be sent with a journalist included in the thread. We can speculate, and there is reasonable, fair expectation that somebody like Jeffrey Goldberg was accidentally included under his initials, JG, when who was meant to be included was a trade chief, Jameson Greer. But if it was accidental, and we'll wait...
So the excuse is, well, it was Jameson Greer, JG, another JG, the trade chief. What the hell is a trade chief doing on a freaking war plans group with the Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, National Security Advisor? Even that's a really shoddy excuse.
To see if this was accidental. It is incredibly concerning that this information would be shared over the Signal app with the journalist included. But the bigger takeaway for me is it's an insight, a transparent insight into the thought process and dialogue of our national leaders. If you look at the actual content of what was reported, if you look at how they discuss potential strikes on Houthis in Yemen, what you will see is dialogue between Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, Stephen Miller, Tulsi Gabbard, and many more in a very collaborative, open, honest, team-based attempt to come to the right decision after years of secret.
It's a little bit concerning, but the main takeaway is it's wonderfully transparent, cooperative, this team-based approach to disseminating sensitive information on an app. With someone that just joined the app in the Kremlin. Anyway, just it's wonderfully cooperative. I mean, isn't it wonderful? Isn't it? I mean, I did say it's a bit concerning before, but only because I had to, because literally it is. But let's just forget I said that and just concentrate on how wonderfully transparent it is.
And incompetence. If you read the content of these messages, I think you'll come away proud that these are the leaders making these decisions in America. All right, on to another.
Wonder what you said about Hillary Clinton. Right, then what does Josh Hawley, a Republican senator, say?
Senator Hawley, I'll just read part of this piece in The Atlantic. The world found out shortly before 2 p.m. Eastern on March 15th
we'll forward
that
one.
Pete Hegseth at 11:44.
Well, I thought what the Secretary of Defense just said, Laura, was an outstanding statement. And listen, I mean, we don't know how much of this is accurate or not, but it looks like even if everything the Atlantic reported is true, it's the president's advisors discussing among themselves options they might recommend to the president. And nobody can deny the success of what the president is doing here, which is what Pete Hegseth just underscored. And this is what the leftist media is reduced to. They can't argue with the policies, which the American people support. They can't argue with this new demonstration of American strength that is keeping Americans safe at home and abroad. And so now we're griping about who's on a text message and who's not. I mean, come on.
That's horrific, horrific hypocrisy there from Josh Hawley. Oh, we're griping about what? Griping about servers? Griping about Hillary Clinton's emails? Okay. Double standards. Just complete hypocrisy. This is Sean Hannity on Fox News.
Instead, they are obsessed with an accidentally leaked text, a chain from Trump cabinet officials who are debating the merits of military strikes in Yemen. So the very people that covered up their president's severe cognitive decline, lied about wide open borders, both of which are clear and present dangers to our country, now want you to believe that they actually give a damn and care about national security. More feigned, phony outrage. This is now the scandal of the week that you will see nonstop, 24/7, that nobody will care about. Now, by the way, it's not only a smear, but it's waged by the left. That's all they've got, and their bingo cards. And instead...
I mean, he's desperate. This is absolute desperation, but it will work on a lot of the... what he's doing is priming the audience, saying, hey, you know, you're going to hear this 24/7, but this is great. And these are from these people, and he tries to, again, poison the well. Oh, look at how terrible they are over here. Blah, blah, blah. Mental decline of Biden. He's still banging on about that, mate. This is a signal app that's been used by the top people in national security, literally breaking your own laws. But, you know, you're cool with that. You're cool with that, Sean, because you have to be. Jesse Waters from Fox News.
Yeah, they accidentally leaked something to the media instead of the Democrats actually leaking classified information to the media. Jessica.
No.
All right? At least they didn't homebrew a server and acid wash it. But her emails, I just did it.
Mar-a-Lago toilets, and they invited him in.
Mar-a-Lago toilets?
Yeah,
what are you talking
where
about?
the national security secrets that were subpoenaed.
This is a family show, Jessica.
Yeah.
Clean it up.
Can we just stick with the topic today?
I hate all of them apart from Jessica Tarlov. These are all horrible humans. The way they dismiss her and the way he jokes about that, Jesse Waters, I find it despicable. Despicable. And then we've got Tommy Tuberville, another horrible senator.
Oh, it's on the radar screen. President Trump is two things, Panama Canal and Greenland. Panama Canal is working out exactly the way he wanted it to. You know, BlackRock brought...
Oh, no, actually, that's wrong. That's for another video. I was planning on doing another time. Okay, Mike Johnson has responded that Waltz and Hegseth shouldn't be disciplined over the war plans. Really? So, okay. No one should be disciplined. But I'm sure Trump was talking about 2016, the full, you know, anyone that does anything dodgy with classified information should feel the full force of the law, right? Oh, no, they shouldn't be disciplined. Okay. Oh, that's fine, Mike. Right. Okay. And then Elon Musk's opinion is best place to hide a dead body is on page 2 of the Atlantic magazine because no one ever goes there. So Elon Musk doesn't really deal with the substance. Again, he's just slagging off the Atlantic a bit like Donald Trump, a piece from the same pod. Shashank Joshi says, sorry, from The Economist, we may have inadvertently suggested that placing classified information on unclassified systems was a grave breach of protocol and law and a resigning offence. What we actually meant to say was it's just banter and very funny indeed. Ha ha ha. Just the way these people are reacting is I think, pretty despicable. And then you go to like the popular reaction, the reaction of people in the information spaces, like cynical Publius here, a right-wing source on Twitter. I'll read the Signal chat and the Atlantic article. The minute I read the chat, my very first thought was that Goldberg was specifically and deliberately included so that he would leak what he saw to the public. The idea was to let Europe know just how unhappy American leadership is with Europe's unwillingness to pull its weight militarily. They've been telling us that really publicly without having to do this stupid thing. So this is the most ridiculous theorizing, post hoc rationalization. The back channel, seemingly accidental nature of the reveal was powerful, and I believe intentional. Also, as someone who has read his fair share of top secret SCI war plans, this ain't it. Tommy Vitor from Pod Save America says, incredible rationalizations are happening here. I guess fan fiction is easier than confronting the reality that when you make a drunk weekend Fox News anchor your Secretary of Defense, this is what happens. And I would like to bring in to play cognitive dissonance here. That you'll be getting an awful lot of Republicans who will be meeting this evidence against their position that their government is competent and that Trump and Hegseth and all these people are wonderful humans, and then you've got this massive bit of evidence against that. How do you deal with that? How do you dismiss that? How do you deal with this dissonance, this disharmony in your brain? And what you're seeing is cognitive dissonance reduction on show, plenty here. You will use all sorts of techniques to degrade shooting the messenger is degrading the messenger. So if you can shoot the messenger, then you don't have to deal with the message. Or you can adapt the message or say, actually, no, the message was intentional. So you're adapting it to these guys are amazing. And that was what they intended. And that's how amazing they are. They're playing like 5D chess. So all these different mechanisms that are being utilized here. 5D chess, baby. Ron Filikowski saying to Joey Manorino, who's this, pretending to be a black woman sometime, but then forgot to change his account back over, and is saying, as a black woman from blah, 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 I'm not going to vote Biden. Joey Manorino is like, no, you're not. You're a white guy. There. Just... anyway, so he's just fake all over. But if you believe for 1 minute that Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, Mike Walls and JD Vance randomly and accidentally added the most rabidly anti-Trump journalist to a national security group chat, you're definitely the mark. These are some of the most competent people in the country, and you believe they would just screw up like this? Simply not possible. This is called media strategy, and Trump is famous for stuff like this. Trump didn't know anything about this, mate, so it's got nothing to do with Trump. This is on Mike Walls. It's ridiculous. And then you start getting Democrats reacting. This is Pete Buttigieg.
President Trump, as you saw earlier, was saying he wasn't aware of this report. We're since told he's been briefed on it. But he reposted something that Elon Musk wrote earlier, kind of mocking all of this by making fun of The Atlantic. He wrote, "Best place to hide a dead body is page 2 of The Atlantic magazine because no one ever goes there." Trump reposted that earlier. Do you see that as making light of what has happened here?
Yeah, because this is all a game to them. You know, nobody in Donald Trump's family is on a ship in the Mediterranean. Nobody in Elon Musk's family is at risk from the kinds of economic or security harms that are going on here. They think all of this is a joke or a game because these are incredibly rich, powerful men who, frankly, don't have to worry about the kinds of things most Americans do. And look, this is part of a bigger pattern, right? The sloppiness and the incompetence, whether it's firing the people who were in charge of keeping our nuclear weapons safe, apparently by accident, and then scrambling to hire them back on, whether it's sending an email to try to buy out air traffic controllers in the middle of an air traffic control shortage, and then scrambling after a plane crash to say, oh, that never applied to them, whether it's that Doge site, their so-called wall of receipts, thinking that they were proving that they saved the taxpayer $8 billion with a B, not realizing that the contract they were talking about was $8 million with an M, which means they were off by 100,000%. And now this incredibly grave and serious matter of taking classified information about American battle plans involving American troops and randomly sending those battle plans to the wrong guy. If they don't understand the seriousness of that, then they don't understand how their jobs affect the lives of ordinary American people. And as an American, having the most powerful people in your country not take their responsibilities seriously can be lethal. You know,
spot on, Pete Buttigieg, as you would expect. Again, Pete Buttigieg here at another point.
Do you think someone should be fired over this?
Absolutely. I mean, if I made a mistake like this as a lieutenant, I would be probably not just fired, but probably indicted and tried and maybe in prison. And the idea that, you remember, these guys love talking about merit, right? We hear a lot about this alleged principle that they're hiring people on merit. I think, you know, there's some questions there. I mean, you know, our current Secretary of Defense hadn't shown a lot of evidence of, you know, running a large organization, or let alone running a large organization well. And he got put in charge of the largest organization in the United States of America and the most important organization in the world.
Again, spot on. Can't argue with that. Tom Suozzi, who was elected recently in New York, says this:
Republican Senator Murkowski said it very plainly. She said, what would we be saying if this was the Biden administration? It would be hair on fire. Just straightforward looking at it, this is a major screw-up of classic. What are the Chinese saying right now? What are our European allies saying? How do they feel about sharing intelligence data with us when people are acting in this cavalier way on very sensitive topics? So this is, it's a pretty straightforward thing it's wrong. Republicans.
Absolutely. It's wrong. Someone needs to go for it. And this is Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker.
We're talking now about our military. We're talking now about our national security has been compromised because they're using a texting app to share plans about how they're going to attack the Houthis abroad. If someone had been on that chain that hadn't been a patriotic American like Jeffrey Goldberg, if someone who wanted to maybe get something out of it had been on that chain, it would have gone abroad. It would have been broadcast to other people. The Houthis would have known that our soldiers, our pilots were coming, and their lives would have been lost. So this is not, we're not kidding around anymore. The confusion that they're causing, the chaos that they're causing, the Trump administration, that is now gone to the Defense Department, our intelligence agencies, and is being effectuated so that our military is being put at risk and our national security is being put at risk. We can't stand this any longer. I mean, Pete Hegseth, which everybody knows he's unqualified to be the defense secretary, is responsible here. Donald Trump should fire Pete Hegseth.
I would have been a little bit more careful with my modal language earlier in that, but yeah, I get the point.
Their emails, sir.
This is Adam Kinzinger, veteran and former lawmaker.
I think it's just important to remind people that Signal is safer than using text, but is not completely safe. The fact that they did this after going after Hillary Clinton with her email server and going after anybody that leaks and saying how terrible the Biden administration was at protecting secrets, and then Pete Hegseth gets off the plane evidently unaware that the National Security Council spokesperson already confirmed that the texts were legit, and he instead goes after the reporter. The reporter who, by the way, did not share the secret details of what was on there because he actually cares about his country. Any one of us that served in the military or serve in the military would be in Leavenworth if we did this. Unacceptable. And they can't put this all on Mike Waltz. All of them own it. I think it's...
And that's interesting. We're going to come to that in a wee while. Sorry, this has been going on for a long time. But former British Secretary of Defense Secretary of Defense criticises Trump envoy Witkoff. I know that's another one that shouldn't be there. But we do have, but having said that, Grant Shapps has, we're going to come to that in a second, Grant Shapps has said something about this, which we'll come to in the next segment. Pat Ryan, just randomly, lots of people saying similar things like this. This is a veteran. I served 2 combat tours in Iraq as an Army intelligence officer. If I did what Secretary of Defense did, I'd be in prison. All I should now be on FBI Director Kash Patel. Beyond pure corruption, I cannot think of a single reason for him not to launch an investigation ASAP. And of course, he won't, because corruption is exactly what won't happen. Right, Andrew Neil, again, Conservative commentator from the UK, who I would never normally agree with, is on point here. By far the most interesting revelation from the Omnishambles is a visceral anti-Europeanism of the most senior people in Trump's government. J.D. Vance argues against attacking the Houthis because it only helps Europe, whose trade depends much more on the Suez Canal than America's, 40% versus 3%. I fully share your loathing of European freeloading, replies Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Quote, it's pathetic. They end up agreeing to send a bill to the Houthi attacks for the attacks to Europe, wondering how to respond if Europe refuses to pay. None of these great brains mention that the Houthis are Iranian proxies, which is why the US is attacking them, not to help Europe as part of its putting pressure on Iran's strategy. If Europe has yet to realise the North Atlantic Alliance is over, NATO, it should now, after reading these exchanges. And I am going to add a couple of things. The idea that 37% of trade is European trade going through the Suez Canal and only 3% is US trade. forgets a whole bunch of things. Like, trade is a two-way thing, right? So 37% of that trade, actually, you need to halve that, because where's that trade coming from? So actually 18% of that is European trade, and 18% is what, Chinese, Asian, whatever. Or 37% is these people to these people. So it affects that part of the world as well. But also anything that gets made in Europe that is using components that were sourced through the Suez Canal and then get sent to the US is affecting the US, right? There's just so many levels of ineptitude going on with what people like Pete Hegseth are saying. It is staggering. Yeah, and of course what Andrew Neil was saying about actually this is part of the anti-Iran strategy. Yaroslav Trofimov says, I must say the idea of billing Europe for US military operation against the Houthis strikes me as almost as bizarre as the leak itself. Why not bill India, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, Japan too, or China? Absolutely. 100%. That's kind of what I was just saying. Guy Verhofstadt, the former Belgian Prime Minister and member of the European Parliament, said, JD Vance says, if you think we should do it, let's go. I just hate bailing Europe out again. Hegseth, I fully share your loathing of European freeloading. It's pathetic. Another wake-up call for a real European defence. When will EU leaders act? So there's this movement to get Europe to stand up to this. And Grant Shapps, so this is the Grant Shapps comment, who was a conservative Secretary of Defence. I agree Europe must do more in security, but Sir Keir Starmer should remind the USA that the UK led from the front. I authorised 4 RAF strikes on the Houthis, and the Royal Navy defended Red Sea shipping. So this is on a Conservative watch, and they still continue to help. Our forces risked their lives to protect trade. Some in DC need reminding of that. Wow. So then, there's this further division driven between Europe and the US. And then finally, how's the White House reacting to this? Lev Parnas, who's an interesting chap himself, saying, my sources, and he will have some sources in the Trump administration, tell me that Trump is furious about the leak of military plans in this Signal chat fiasco. It's a major embarrassment for his administration. Right now, it looks like Mike Walls, the National Security Advisor who reportedly set up the chat, is a front contender to pay the price for the screw-up. I wouldn't be surprised if no one was a fool guy. They would just sweep this under the carpet and carry on, sweep it under the rug and carry on as if it never happened, like they're doing now. However, there will be people angry behind the scenes. Kate Collins reports that the White House Caitlin Collins is expressing confidence in Mike Walls, with Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt saying in a statement, as President Trump said, the attacks on the Houthis have been highly successful and effective. President Trump continues to have the utmost confidence in his national security team, including National Security Advisor Mike Walls, which could be the whole kind of like football club board saying we have confidence in the coach, in the manager, before then sacking him. Forcing out Waltz, says Blake Allen, is the pretty obvious play here if you're the JD Vance aligned part of the administration. Until his nomination, Waltz was pro-Ukraine, relatively pro-Europe, a traditional US national security guy, although he's started drifting. They'll try to protect Hegseth. So actually it will be a shame if Mike Waltz is the guy to go, because he's actually the most sensible of the lot in terms of foreign policy. But yeah, a senior administration official told Politico the White House isn't sure if Mike Waltz can survive as National Security Advisor after the Atlantic's bombshell. Quote, half of them are saying he's never going to survive or shouldn't survive. The official said it was reckless not to check who was on the thread. It was reckless to be having that conversation on Signal. You can't have recklessness as a National Security Advisor. But they must be having so many of these Signal. That's not going to be the only one, for sure. A person close to the White House was even more blunt. Quote, everyone in the White House can agree on one thing. Mike Waltz is an effing idiot. Yeah, and here is... this meant to be... This was a UK former army chap saying, here's a picture of me, a European security freeloading in Afghanistan as part of the US Army Special Forces Task Force. Look, they even gave me a special free loader badge to wear above my medals. 12 close friends and colleagues killed when they were freeloading too. This is so the sorts of things that the American administration are saying in okay, albeit in private, but actually, to be honest, that has been said by people like JD Vance in public as well. That Europe are kind of freeloading is really annoying people who have previously fought on behalf of the US. in the invocation of Article 5, etc., etc. So, yeah, this is a big story, and it should be a big story. I'm just going to leave you with what these guys conclude at the end here, and we'll leave it at that.
Will it have any effect? Zoe, just briefly first, and then Jerry, on to you.
Yes, I can imagine it will. And you're right. It is strange that this one seems to be this administration seems fairly ironclad, whereas the last one was just heads rolling left and right.
Well, it's kind of purposefully ironclad, isn't it? You are not allowed to detract or
No, it's a kind of loyalist
from Trump. Yeah,
it's a sort of dictatorship style. So of course it has to be ironclad. But inevitably, that doesn't mean. Obviously, we know from history, and we know from So of course it isn't. And yeah, this is as good as any reason for those chinks to start getting really, really big. And perhaps they already are, but it's going to become visible soon. I think you're probably right about that.
Any danger here, Jerry?
This is a much tighter knit team than the team Trump had in his first. We've all said that and seen that, and it's true. These are handpicked people, loyalists to Trump, who are, whose allegiance to him is not in any question. Very unlike that first team. So that's why we saw leaks, a lack of cohesion, disagreements, all constantly bursting out into the public. That's what makes this so interesting, Kate, is that first of all there are signs of disagreements there within this group, and JD Vance going out there saying, first of all, saying that we don't really want to do anything to help the Europeans here. Why are we doing this? This seems like a mistake. Though there are clearly policy. Now, there are always policy discussions in any administration. That's not new. But it was quite interesting that the way he presented it as, does the president really know about it? Does the president know this is really going to benefit the Europeans and is not really going to be of much use to the US? That suggests, again, some divisions within there. But secondly, it's just this, if somebody here, there is a massive, massive level of incompetence here on somebody's part. We don't know exactly who, and even if it's a staffer in somebody's office, obviously somebody's got to take responsibility for it. And that level of incompetence is going to lead to divisions of its own sort. I mean, there are going to be people, I would imagine right now that if you're JD Vance, you're absolutely furious about this, or if you're Marco Rubio, you're furious about it, or whoever's responsible for this. So that even though these people are all fiercely loyal to Donald Trump and in a servile way, they're clearly, they're going to be fighting like the proverbial rats in a sack over stuff like this. And so we could probably then expect to see things, erupt into the open, perhaps a little more than we were thinking.
And Donald Trump's response, kind of, who cares? Because those attacks were highly successful. And
I can see plausibly that there will be no changes and that the Trump administration will ignore this. And that's made easier because they don't allow critical journalists that are critical of the Trump administration to get enough airtime, really, to get those critical questions in. And they just have appeasers surrounding them in the White House, in the Pentagon, in public. And as soon as he's asked a difficult question, he's like, who do you work for? Oh, ABC News. Well, I don't need to listen to you. Oh, is it? So as soon as it's someone that's going to ask him something critical, he'll just dismiss it. And I'm sure you'll start seeing that from other people in the Trump administration. And then you become completely impervious to anything remotely critical of your administration. And then you look more and more like a dictatorship. And you don't have to get rid of incompetent people or people who have just done really bad things, because no one's going to hold you to account, because the people holding the government to account are kept out of the public eye. And that is an absolute, I think, a crime against democracy. Prove me wrong. Please prove me wrong. I'd love to see some heads roll for this. But then the flip side is, if it's Mike Waltz, he's the only one of those who's like, and even he's, I don't think he's great at all, but he's like the most slightly normal. I would say Marco Rubio as well. But I mean, both of these have just started becoming super, super MAGA anyway. I don't know. Let me know what you think as ever in the threads below. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.